Hi, this is Mark Soden for Wonder Valley Experimental 16, and I'm here with Caroline Partamian.
My name is Caroline Partamian. I'm a sound and visual artist, and I live in Yucca Valley, California.
What started you down the path to the sounds you are making now?
Great question. I come from a background in both music and dance. And when I was younger, I did a lot of ballet and modern dance, and I started playing classical guitar when I was 8. And then right after college, I started playing in punk bands and psych bands and touring a lot. And that was sort of the first time that I learned how to effectively collaborate with other people too, which was awesome. A very different path than playing solo classical guitar for a long time. And then I, after spending 10, almost 10 years living in New York and touring and everything, I started getting into more meditative and ambient music. Um, and started also doing some sound drawings as part of my visual practice and making graphic notations, which is a form of experimental notation. It's very different than Western standardized notation. And I started playing by myself again a lot more, like learning to just how to listen and to effectively collaborate with the instruments with which I was playing. And it was a very different experience for me. And so I um, yeah, the music that I'm making now is sort of like a conglomeration of all of the above. It has some classical elements, it has some experimental elements, it has some punk elements, and using guitar and using synthesizers. But it's a very reflective process and very improvised, and sort of also takes, with my dance background, a lot of things sort of started collating together. So there's a lot of structure within dance background as well with ballet, but specifically with modern dance, there's also a lot of improvisation, and that's also informed my experimental music practice a lot. There's a lot of structure within it, so I'll come to a performance with the structure in mind. But because I'm performing in a different space, because I'm performing with a different amount of bodies in the room, because my mood might be different that day or whatever, there has to be an element of improvisation that's also with that goes along with the music.
Do you have a favorite piece of gear that you are using for Wonder Valley Experimental 16 that you would like to show us?
Um, the One of my favorite pieces of gear is probably a synthesizer that I'll be using, that I think I'll be using for the Wonder Valley Experimental Festival. I don't have it with me in this room. It's quite large, but it's a so. But I can describe it. It's like a big Moog grandmother synthesizer.
Wow.
I'm in my print studio right now, but you'll get to see it at the Wonder Valley Experimental, and less of the like an instrument per se, but maybe the structure of the instruments that I'll be using is my favorite. And I think this is what I'll be doing for Wonder Valley Experimental. Of course, the set is still coming together, but I'm really interested in the physics of sound and the architecture of space in sound. And so I did a performance recently in December at High Desert Test Site's Winter Open House where I had 4 amps facing one another in a room, and I was in the center of it, and there were 2 amps that were emitting clean tones towards one another and 2 amps emitting dirty tones towards one another, so the affected tones. And there's this thing in sonic physics that is called the standing wave. So effectively, if you're at the center of these waves that are the same tone facing each other, they should cancel each other out. So the structure of the amps that I had facing one another was canceling out some sounds, but of course, because I wasn't in a perfectly anechoic room or anything, the sounds were also emitting. So wherever someone was standing in a room, as it is with any type of sound, you'll be kind of getting a different experience. So I'm currently structuring what kind of structure of instruments I'm going to have what is like the architecture of my setup going to be for the Wonder Valley Experimental Festival.
That sounds exciting. That sounds cool.
Thank
Uh, so you touched on this a little bit, but it's always good to know how people prepare for a performance. How do you prepare for a performance?
I think about it a lot. I'm not a procrastinator per se, but I'll have different elements and I'll try and not force it. I'll play a little bit and then I won't force myself to spend 5 or 6 hours in the studio preparing for a performance. I'll write little bits and pieces and think about it, maybe record it as a voice memo, and then think about it for a few days before going back into the studio. Um, and I know I did mention like getting into the sounds that I'm creating today as sort of a more meditative approach. So I do meditate, but just enough to like get focus and be able to listen to the sounds that are sharing the space with me.
I see. Is there anything you would like to add to end the interview? Do you have anything coming up soon?
I am trying to record some of the new pieces I wrote in the last year. So hopefully I'll have a tape that I can share as part of my merch table at Wonder Valley Experimental. And I have one or two new books that I'm making. So a big part of my practice as a visual artist, like I mentioned before, is making graphic notation and sound drawing. So I'm hoping as part of the merch that I'm able to offer at Wonder Valley Experimental is to share some of the graphic notation for the piece that I will be performing at Wonder Valley Experimental. And that's for me sort of this way of, because sound can be such an ephemeral experience, of having more of this artifact for folks to take with them as a memory of the performance. So something to look out for.
Outstanding. Well, this is Mark Soden for Wonder Valley Experimental number 16 with Caroline Partamian. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you,
Have
Mark.
a nice afternoon,
You
and
too.
we'll
I
see
look
you
forward to meeting you in person and
as
performing
as
all the
do
other
I.
artists.
We'll see you in April.